now, having a regenerative system in place, the profits are a lot different off of that land. Is that correct then, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at cattle, I just don't know if... I guess first of all...
This is an episode you do not want to miss. Let's get started. All right, welcome to Soil Talks Podcast. We got Taylor Henry here with us today from Acres U.S.A., the owner and CEO. And just wanted to take a second, chit-chat a little bit with Taylor. I talked to him about his Henry pastures, him taking over, basically owning now and becoming the CEO of Acres U.S.A. and also get into kind of the economics of regenerative agriculture. How does it work? Does it work? And I think Taylor's a perfect person to do that with. So I'm going to start now. Taylor is the owner and CEO of Acres U.S.A., the leading publisher and conference platform for regenerative and organic agriculture in North America. He is also the founder of Henry Pastures, a regenerative livestock operation where he applies holistic management principles inspired by farmers and thinkers such as Gabe Brown, Mark Shepard, and Joel Salatin. Through publishing, events, and hands-on land management, Taylor works to advance practical, profitable farming systems that restore soil health, strengthen rural communities, and support the next generation of farmers. Taylor, thanks a lot for coming on today with us. We're excited to have you on Soil Talks Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you were one of the guys we wanted to have on here because of your knowledge. Not only were you in your past life a police officer, right? But you went to college, you own marketing and media companies, and now you've taken over the reins of Acres U.S.A. You have your own Henry Pastures, which is a regenerative farm. And so, really, we're excited about having you on here. I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and you're going to help a lot of people understand the regenerative principles of farming. But then not only that, you'll be able to talk about Acres USA, which is kind of, I guess you could say, the Bible of eco-agriculture, and you're the leader of it. So that's exciting. So Acres USA, it's been the voice of eco-agriculture for over 50 years. Okay. How does a former law enforcement officer and digital marketer become the steward of this legacy and of Henry Pastures? How did it all come about, if you don't mind, Taylor?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had a really interesting background. When I was 20, I became a cop because, what else would you do once you get kicked out of college? College was, I just was not very good at going to class. And I was just too obsessed with being out on the land. It was like my first piece of freedom because my whole childhood was like sports, very, very rigid and very strict schedules evolved around sports in school. And then I had some injuries, which derailed kind of the college sports career. And I just started hanging out on the land and not going to enough class. So I had 62 credits and you needed 60 credits to get into the police academy. So I jumped in that, and that it was a great experience. Number one, because I realized I wasn't just kind of a screw up because I went to the academy and got first in my class. And I was like, all right, I can still do things when I put my mind to it. And then I started working full time. Shortly after, I'd worked part time for quite a while, and then for 4 years, I was a full time sheriff's deputy in a community north of me here, La Crosse, Wisconsin. So it's about 150,000 people in that county, and got to experience a lot of different things that are helpful for business. But I was obsessed with land, and I knew I wanted to buy land. And at some point while I was a cop, you talk to all the old guys that are in there, and they're all planning on different careers and getting out of being a police officer. I kind of sat back and was like, I better start thinking about what I'm going to do after this. No one's going to be left here in a couple of years, the way it sounds. I ended up being the only person that did leave, but I read about 100 books on entrepreneurship and business the last year I was in a squad car. And I knew that it's controlling my own schedule, having the freedom to go do what you want. The old ideas that what entrepreneurship sells people that have jobs, even though they're not, you really don't have that much time after that.
No, you're actually swamped. It's almost worse.
Yeah, I'll say the cops I still talk to, their idea of my life now is like, well, you get to write all these things off for taxes and you must be able to just go do whatever you want all the time. It doesn't quite work like that.
No, it's tough.
It is. It's a grind. But it's the first business I started was a video production company. I ended up signing up one client that was a reoccurring monthly client. And then I left being a cop, moved back in with my parents, and just tried to figure out a way to make it. A year and a half in, the marketing or the video production company kind of morphed into more of a marketing agency. We had enough success where I was actually able to get a property under contract. And I should say, like, during the entrepreneurship and business like studies, real estate investing was kind of intertwined with that. So I'd studied real estate investing a lot. And, the most important book I probably ever read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Amen.
And it just morphed.
That's great. Yeah, I read that too. So no, that's great. I love it. I'll
still listen to it from time to time, but it just changes like the way you think about money and working with banks and kind of how you want to set up your life. So I was fortunate enough to, we were able to buy a 60-acre farm. It had a couple houses on it. We picked up a cabin next door to it within 6 months. We turned that into an Airbnb. We rented the second house out on the property, lived in the old farmhouse. Hadn't been lived in 3 years, but we had land and we had something to work off of. And at that point I started, the entrepreneurship mindset, how do we monetize the land and make something off the land? Because the idea of the property at first was just for hunting purposes. We had a hunting brand that we were gonna, let's show an example here of how to manage your property. We'll have people out and we'll do courses and all these kind of online learning things. That's kind of the niche that I was in, was online learning in this entrepreneurship marketing world. And that was the business that we were in at the time. And the idea of like information turn into monetization gives you some freedom. How do you create products that kind of last forever? And information is usually the easiest thing to do with that.
Sure.
So Gabe Brown's Dirt to Soil was the first book I read. Second book I read was Restoration Agriculture by Mark Shepard. I realized Mark was just down the road from me, about 19 miles. So I was literally like listening to his book, driving around the perimeter of his property, looking down into it and trying to understand what the heck he was talking about in that. But at some point I just went up, knocked on his door. We had a podcast in the hunting industry at the time. So that's always a great intro or a great end to, meet people. Absolutely. And we did a podcast episode. I kind of gave him a little bit of the background of what we were doing in our business at the time, which was taking books, selling courses, and selling events. And he was kind of like, I have a book that's pretty popular. Like, what can we do on the back end of that? And we created just a quick online course for him, and it did really well. And at this point, I had gotten into media buying online. So like Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube buying. I was doing it for clients, and we were having a lot of success. And when I tested Mark's course, it did really well. So it's kind of like anytime you jump into a new niche, you want to like, dip your toes in and see how it performs. But it was the best performing niche I had been a part of so far. So I knew that there was something there. We had started some conversations with Acres, trying to get some rights back or try to use the book as kind of a front end lead magnet.
Yeah.
It didn't really go anywhere. And I just found the Acres. So the Acres was owned by like a corporation, a holding company of some sort that owned, multiple different brands.
Yeah.
I found the president of that company on LinkedIn and just messaged him. And it started, it wasn't for sale, but it started a 2-year process of back and forth where we ended up coming to an agreement and closing on it 2 years ago. So December of 23.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. No, that's great. So then Henry Pastures, how long have you guys had that for?
2020.
2020?
So I had a marketing
that was quick.
Yeah, I had a marketing agency that we closed on the farm the week of COVID. And I lost 80 to 90% of my clients like the next week, because we were really ingrained in this like chiros, stem cell doctors.
Sure.
Kind of like we got in this niche that was really good. But then when COVID hit, all their offices got shut down and they were made into like emergency like hospital rooms.
Yeah.
So we had lost
business is gone
pretty much. And it was a good lesson. Like you obviously can't be, we were just over levered in a certain niche.
Yeah.
And, like at that point it was just, we had to grind. It was a grind for, 2 years. I started doing real estate videography. And then these realtors were asking me to come out on these properties and explain them because they didn't have the kind of like the back end information for farmers or hunters. And then once I did a couple of those, I was like, well, I might as well just get my real estate license. And that's kind of what took off. So if you remember, like in 21, 22, real estate was kind of a free for all where I just got in it. I got in at the right time, ended up having a lot of success. And then it put us in position to get to the point where we could feel comfortable, getting something like Acres.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in Acres, that it seems like it fits perfect because, right, it has the books, it has the education, it has all of those things which you were already kind of an expert at, just in a different marketplace, right? I mean, in
Yeah,
essence, you were
exactly.
already building that through, the work that you were doing before that in hunting and hunting properties and teaching people. So that's perfect. So, and in Acres USA, it's not just a magazine. It's really, like I said, it's the Bible of eco-ag. You ask about regenerative practices, eco-ag, you ask about any of those things, Acres is the company that people go to, whether they want to advertise, whether they want to, learn, whatever it may be. And you guys do a great job doing that as well.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate it.
Charles, yeah, absolutely. And Charles Walters, he found that, and he found much more than a brand. He really sparked this massive movement. So, now that you're into it, it's a couple of years in. As you took the reins, how did you navigate that? The weight of preserving that 50-year legacy, I guess, and then not only that, but finding the courage to evolve it into what it is now.
Well, it was a grind. I was pretty certain I made a terrible mistake for the first 6 months. So I inherited, like, I drove by myself one way to Greeley, Colorado, signed the contracts, closed on the company. I still had an office in Greeley, Colorado with like 12 employees. And it was just, if I would do a million things differently if I could do it again. I had no idea. It's one of those things. And if you've ever been in a position where you buy something, you feel like it's a good idea, and maybe you let some like details slip through the cracks that maybe you should have thought of before. Like that was
every
definitely going
entrepreneur
on.
does it, right?
Yeah.
Every entrepreneur does it. I mean,
If
you want it.
if you knew all the bad things that were going to happen, you wouldn't have done it. And it was just kind of like a circus for 6 months. The company was in a rough spot. So like, number one, it wasn't just preserving like the legacy or like the content. It was preserving the company, because it was getting to a point where who knows who would have taken it over. Like, I think of it, you think of like who's buying a company like that. It's a unique company. It's kind of three different companies intertwined as one. If you look through the landscape of like who our technical competitors are, you have people who publish books, they're kind of on their own. You have people who maybe publish a magazine, if they exist still, they're kind of on their own. And then you have people who run events, and then they're kind of on their own. Most people don't do all three together. And it truly is three different businesses. So I was doing everything, because we pretty much, it was like buying an old house and taking it down to the to the 2x4s and then rebuilding it up. And I was answering customer support phone calls for 2 months during that first year.
Do what you got to do, though, right? I mean, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, because it wasn't like, I guess here's an idea for people who ever think about selling a company. Almost every single task or every single thing that happens on a daily basis in that company should be written down in some form. Like, it's difficult to ask your employees to do this, but like, if your employee if they could take notes daily for 2 weeks and then see exactly what they do throughout the week, what tasks they're doing, anyone who would look to buy a business would see the value in it much higher if you had all these things laid out. We
all
had
your
none
standard
of it.
operating procedures, right? Like everything that you do, SOPs.
SOPs. Yeah. SOPs are like, they're probably like one of the most important things in business, truly. Like, if obviously you need customers and you need traffic and you need like the marketing side, but if you don't have SOPs, there's no scalability to a business, and there definitely isn't a sellable business. So I went through every stage of the business, from sales, advertising, marketing, customer support, all of it, and had to pretty much make all of them myself. And then slowly, then we started bringing on other employees, and we're at a fairly, I would say, fairly stable position right now. But from the content standpoint, they had veered. If you think about like, who am I selling to? What am I selling? You want to think about your customer base. Well, in a media company like this, we're technically kind of a low ticket item, so you need more volume. So the previous owners had kind of shifted into this like homesteading / maybe smaller scale farming, which is logical if you think about it, because there's more of those people to buy stuff.
Absolutely.
But what it had done is it had like kind of tainted the historical audience of Acres. So, and I looked at it like, if we want to truly make a big impact, I love homesteaders, I love small scale farmers, but if we want to make a true big impact, plus I don't think there's many organizations that cover this stuff. Like, I want real production scale agriculture talked about in the magazine and at our events. The books cover kind of the whole wide range thing, but you can't cover someone farming 1,000 acres and someone starting a homestead necessarily in the same magazine issue. It's difficult to do.
Yeah, they don't really work out.
Yeah. our audience historically was this larger scale production. That's what Charles Walters had started. We were talking about people who do 10,000, 20,000 acres,
Yeah.
real shifters in agricultural production. So we kind of, like, the nice thing about having someone like Charles Walters be the founder, I just studied on what he was talking about. I listened to every single one of his talks that we have on recording. I've read all of his books, and his name's on probably 17 or so, I think. And, he was kind of like this. He was like a Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown before those guys.
Yep.
In this industry.
Absolutely, he was 100%. Yeah.
Could you imagine how popular he would be right now? Because obviously we're in a way bigger market now than what they were in the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely. I mean, even in 2008, when we got into all this, and started dealing with soil health and, biologicals and rebuilding soil and regenerative ag and all those things, you look at where it's even come from then to now. I mean, the guy he would be a god in essence, almost, like he'd be the top pillar of everything.
Yeah. He'd have been invited to that USDA meeting that they had 2 weeks ago. Although
Absolutely.
I don't know if he would have gone.
I don't think he would have. I
No.
don't think he would have. So, I guess from your standpoint, then, what was the aha moment when you realized that regenerative agriculture wasn't just a niche movement, but it was actually necessary in the evolution for the global food system, I guess you could say? Like, this is the future, right? We're living in the future. Everybody said, oh, it's going to happen in the future. Charles Walters thought that in the 70s. We're now 2026, January. And you look at this and it's like, this is the way every operation is moving. And some of them are slower to adopt, right? But I mean, we're talking large scale. Last week we had a farm on, it's 15,000 acres, and they are integrating these principles, regenerative principles. And it's hard to say regenerative when you don't have cattle on operations, I feel like, because it's not truly regenerative. I guess they're putting biologicals, they're understanding the soil health side of things. So what do you think? I mean, did you have that, like, an aha moment when you're like, this is not just a niche, this is the future, this is it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the most logical thing to me. You have to understand, I didn't have any like negative viewpoints or thoughts because I didn't grow up farming. I grew up in town. My only exposure to farming was we had a family farm that my dad grew up on that was still being ran by his brother, and it was a conventional dairy farm.
Sure.
And I went and that's how I first learned about kind of selling beef too. I just took his beef and started selling it for free. And I got to see into that operation, and it made no sense to me. Now, do dairy farmers there might be a personality trait where they just complain a lot? Well, he's definitely that. Like, it was just, we have no money, we're no
broke.
hope. It doesn't matter what you do. And like, in my mind, I'm like, why wouldn't you change something? Like, why wouldn't you do something different? Now, granted, there's a lot of onion peels to peel back on that. The easiest thing you can do when you first start learning about these things and you don't understand the conventional model and you weren't part of it, is you kind of be like, well, why wouldn't you do that? But you don't have the life experience that they have, all the years that, going through the 80s when interest rates were 22%.
Yep.
Going through whatever.
Farms were being lost. People were losing everything quickly.
Yeah, there's a lot of scars, like scar tissue for people to break through. And it's like, I don't blame them. They're in a tough spot. So I grew to, kind of understand that a little bit. From my perspective, when I started learning about regenerative agriculture, it didn't seem like there was another option. And I got bit by the cattle bug. I had my first group of stockers out at our place and just kind of fell in love with grazing cattle. And when you look at, what grazing cattle or rotational grazing cattle can do, it just seemed like a solution for so many problems. I understand now that there's a lot of other issues that beyond just the management side that hurt us on those side of things. But from my perspective, I was like, this just makes the most sense, direct to consumer. But I had direct to consumer protein sales, beef, pigs, chicken. But I had the unfair advantage of coming from a marketing agency. Like, I was running one. I could whip a website up in a day and then push some money at it and see what works. So, I've changed my thoughts a little bit on that. Like, for people, if you're truly recommending a wide net or wide range solution for farmers economically being profitable, it's tough to just say, go direct to consumer, because that's a whole other business in itself too.
Yeah, and it is tough, and it is true that's a completely different business. The thing I like though is the simple fact that you were you were an entrepreneur before you bought the land, right? Before you did
Yeah.
all that, and you weren't, and I don't want to say tainted, but you weren't tainted per se by the conventional side, right? Like all of these years of being pushed, conventional fertilizers and different things to fix this problem and that problem, all these conventional inputs, synthetic inputs, all of this, and this is the only way to do it. So you were able to have a different view of it, right? And like you said, it made sense to you. You're like, yeah, why wouldn't I have it regenerative versus all of these input costs and all this expense? From an entrepreneurial standpoint, running a business, you understand input costs and what things cost, right? In a business.
Well, and I just kept running the numbers, and I was like, there's no way that this works. I would go talk to, this is one of the most important, anyone who's getting started, you should go talk to the neighbors and go talk to the guys who are raising conventional crops. Yes. And just see how much they'll tell you. Like I was asking them, like, how much money are you making on this, and how much does it cost you to do this? And then they'd give you the numbers and be like, well, there's no way you're buying land with that. They had land from 40, 50 years ago paid off. Sure. So it's the way I looked at it, and the way, because I was full on like wanting to be a full-time farmer. That's what I wanted to do, because it is a great situation. I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to be stuck behind a computer. Like, yeah, that sounds like a great life.
Yep.
Yeah. But I literally could not figure out the financial model, like the economic model for you to actually have a successful business.
Yep. And imagine subsidies, right? And that's where all these guys play in. A lot of the guys play in, they're all subsidized, right? Government gives them money. They lose money per acre. They're paid out. They make money, or I should say they service their debt.
People are obviously making money in some ways, but they're sitting on an appreciated asset that I don't have access to. I didn't get gifted. I did not inherit land. If anything, I want to buy more of it, and I'd like to find some sort of a solution to help pay for it. I've changed the way I look at land now a little bit, where I look at it more as like put it in the same category as like your retirement account. And then, you make as much of payments as you can on it. And I think we'll be sitting fine in 30, 40 years. But that's not necessarily a solution for someone who wants to farm full time and buy land and their family isn't. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and then we'll get into the next part, and I like this because it's like, let's discuss how the current industrial model often keeps farmers in a debt trap, right? Like this is what we're talking about, of high cost synthetic inputs, right? So it's a debt trap, really. That's what it is. So, the current industrial model is what? You produce something, but you have to have inputs, all these different synthetic inputs, whether it's conventional fertilizers, sprays, whatever this looks like, right? Input, output. So as we look at that, it keeps them in a trap because year over year, 9 times out of 10, these farms will go out and what will they do? They borrow money, right? They get their farm loan for the year and they buy their new tractor, put up their new shed. They do all of these different things. And there's a debt trap there that they're never really able to ever get out of by using all these conventional and synthetic inputs. Now, I think since you understand it, you're an entrepreneur, right? And turned, farmer and all of these different things. So you understand it well. Like if you had that, you would be caught in that same debt trap. Whereas now, having a regenerative system in place, the profits are a lot different off of that land. Is that correct then, Taylor?
Yeah. When you look at cattle, I just don't know I guess first of all, Rich Dad Poor Dad Robert Kiyosaki taught me that debt is not a bad thing. So I was never afraid of debt. I levered the whole thing. I didn't pay $1 on the farm. I was able to figure out a way to put $0 down. And I've kind of done that with almost everything. Any real estate I've ever bought, I've never put $1 down for. Now, would I do it differently now that I have a family and I'm older, I guess? Yeah, I would not lever things as aggressively as I did. I got fortunate where I was able to fully leverage the property. I begged my parents to help me. I begged my parents to put a lien against their house that was paid off. That's what covered the down payment for the farm. And then we got lucky with the timing. I was able to get a new appraisal on the farm within a year, refinance, and get rid of their lien. That can't probably be done right now. It wouldn't have been able to be done in the last 2 years for sure. But my idea was originally I need to get that off as soon as possible. And we were fortunate when we bought it, and there's other ways you can do that. You can always value add things. You can buy an empty piece of property, throw a house up on it, get it reappraised. There's other ways to do it still.
Sure.
So I'm not afraid of debt. I borrowed money for the first group of cattle I bought, and probably the first 3 years. And because I was doing the other businesses, I would just pay off that operating loan and then take the extra money and put it towards the next year's herd. 3 years, I was out of debt and had a group of 20 cattle paid for.
Yeah,
that's a way better position to be in. And then right now, you're asking people, are you going to really go buy a cattle herd without using debt? I don't know. I mean, I still probably would use debt if I was going to go buy a new herd, but that's a lot more sane than borrowing to go get a tractor or borrowing to go get a new truck. Like there's
or
things
synthetic inputs, right? Like synthetic inputs, like you're borrowing to buy, chemicals. You're borrowing to go buy, fertilizers. And it's tough because that's part of their inputs, but it does keep them kind of in a trap, right? Because their yields are only going to usually hit a certain amount. There's certain issues that they run into.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to tell you that I know more about the commodity breakdown. If I were those people, what are they borrowing on? Like I've probably taken a pretty nice interest rate on an operating line. I hope they have, like my rule would be if I was someone like that is, hopefully you have the cash of what you're borrowing in a different account. You're just borrowing because you don't want to expose your cash that you have available. When you do borrow, you have the leverage of kind of when you pay it back a little bit. The cash isn't just gone. So, like in that situation, are they borrowing for an expense that they know they can pay back in a year? Where you get in trouble then is if you borrow something, you can't pay back that operating note from that year, and then you're carrying it over the next year, then that can become a giant problem. I mean, that was my rule with the cattle. It's like, I don't care. I don't care if they made me, whatever they made me, I was gonna have to suck it up and pay off the debt at the end of the year, or you can't start carrying things over, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, no. And that's that debt trap that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like what is it? Yeah, when I went to Joel Salatin's place this year, he had a good rule. It was like you pay something off in 3 years, thumbs up. If it starts taking more than 7 years, thumbs down on, I think, tractors, implements, assets that are supposed to last you a few years. If you're taking something for just that year, that thing has to be paid off that year, or you're going to get into some problems.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think how you leverage debt and how people use debt separates a large percentage of people.
Gotcha. No, yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. So then I guess asking you, since you understand debt side of things, which is great, the entrepreneurial side of it. So how do we shift the mindset of a farmer from being a commodity producer to being a biological entrepreneur?
Well, I think that's
the best way to put it.
That's what I challenge the people that are creating our content all the time is we have to show them an actual path to it. Like I told all of our speakers this year at the conference, like you have to tie in the economics. This can't be this frolicking through the flowers worldview that just because we're integrated with the land, like, yeah, that's awesome. I go outside and walk around barefoot and ground and hang out and just watch my cattle too. But if there's not an economic model, then we're just selling this fairy tale that's not going to solve any problem. We're talking about actual people who are actual farmers, not the people who are coming from a city who want to own like a little piece of land and homestead. So
yes,
that's our challenge is how do we give them the path to it? How do we give them the examples, show the examples of people who've done it? In my opinion, anyone who asks me how, is this even possible? I point to a couple people. Number one, in the commodity world, I point to Gary Zimmer. Gary has handed a property off to the next generation, completely paid for. They have no need to put inputs in. The thing is set up perfectly. He grows corn. They got rid of their dairy cattle. They don't have cattle on it anymore. And on the off year, they grow cover crops. So in a normal person's mindset, how could you possibly just grow cover crops in this off year and not take any money from it? Because they harvest, the winter rye, but I don't think they make much of anything on it.
Sure.
So in theory, they're half of the farm is sitting dormant for a year, but that other half makes enough money to cover it. And that's through the swings of the last 3-4 years as well. So there's an example of someone, Rick Clark's another example in Indiana, like big, large scale commodity producer. And these guys they've just done things a lot differently. They steered away from the chemical inputs a long time ago And it's, the Albrecht model is kind of the path forward, I think, in the commodity world. Like if you can get your soil balance, we're so out of whack with our minerals, your micros and your micros and macros. If we can get that stuff balanced, then we don't need all that stuff, but it will cost money up front, which that's the difficult thing about it. I mean, you guys are in that same world. I would assume your products
that's our
aren't
business.
Yeah. You aren't exactly telling people that their production or their input costs are going to be cut in half year one and their yield goes up by 2 times. It's going to be a process. But the idea behind the biological process is that there's an end goal. There's an end to you can get out of it. You don't need, at some point, you're not going to need to do it every year. And
That's right.
The chemical world is this never ending cycle that, you throw it on, it gives you a decent crop that year, but that soil becomes more and more reliant on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just a hamster wheel, right? And the hardest part that we see a lot with, we work with a lot of people in pretty much all 50 states. We talk to producers all over, and the hardest thing that we see is for them to change their mindset, right, or to be able to have that extra capital to be able to start switching some of their land over. Even it is tough for them, because they're stuck in that debt trap, right? Like they got to make the payments on the tractors, and they got to make the payments on all of these things. And they think the only way they can do that, or the way they've built their models, is at the end of the day, we have to have a crop and it has to produce this much in order to cover this debt, And so that's where the debt trap is that we're starting to see. But on the flip side of it, there are a lot of people that are starting to also come to the realization, just by integrating things like biologicals, or just little changes, and replacing some of their input costs with things that are beneficial to soil that will help rebuild the soil profile. That's where they're starting to make, some of those gains and some of the margin that they need in order to start switching over. And we've worked in a lot of different industries, like we've worked in, obviously, agriculture, pretty much every crop you could ever imagine, to reclamation and remediation work with large oil and gas companies. And those guys, they don't care what it costs, right? They're just like, and it's funny because they're just like, we have millions of dollars tied to this well pad. I don't care what it costs. Get something to grow here so we can get our money back. Mm-hmm. Different in farming by far. It's just a different bear. But, and then what do you think that first year of transitioning away from government subsidies, like if you had a farm or a producer, and I'm sure you guys talk about this quite a bit, but if you had a government subsidized conventional model and you're wanting to try to switch over, what does that look like on a balance sheet? Like, how does that work? You just slowly, what would you suggest? Slowly start to integrate then?
I think,
or what would you think?
To me, like, cattle are the easiest one to at least get integrated. Like, to me, Gary's operation is a great example. Why not just graze those cover crops in the off year, and that would add a pile of money to the operation. And I think you would do a lot better with the next year's crop with it. They're to the point where they don't need to, and they'd rather not deal with it. I get a little frustrated when people, they don't want to deal with the cattle. Like, I run all of these companies, and we still have, I have our largest herd of cattle out here now. We're up to 40 moms, and I spend, right now I'm spending less than 2 hours a week on it because we're out, it's winter, we're bale grazing, everything's set up. I think with the fencing and the rotational grazing system, it takes a little bit to get set up and it takes a little bit to get used to. But once it's set up, it is very little, very, very little labor. I don't think you need much labor, especially, you think of like the farmers, how much labor it is to have a lot of cattle and to have it go in and clean all that out, run a feeder or mixer every day, go make sure they have that. I can go place out the amount of bales that I need for, 3-4 days. I've done it as much as, the week we had our conference, I did it for 8 days where I never had to look at them. And, as long as someone's checking the water and we're just keeping an eye on them, everything's fine. But the electric fencing and the rotational grazing mindset, I think, makes it a lot easier to control your cattle. Like, I don't need a big, I would love to have a pen with concrete for those wet times, but how do you justify $25,000 in concrete? Like, it's not justifiable to me. Like, I'd much rather just put the bales out on the land, and then, what we do is we just run the pigs across the bales in the spring and the chickens, and then scratch it up a little bit and plant next year's cover crop, which ends up turning into, the stockpile forage that we use in the winter and save about a month on bales.
That's nice. So I think, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just think the cover crop, like integrating the livestock, would pay back for these guys a lot. Like, even if you're just bale grazing, at least when I go out west and you go across these giant cornfields, a lot of them are still, grazing the corn stalks. Like, at least that's something. They're out there. Yeah. I just wouldn't want to deal with cattle that were penned up all the time. You'd have to have so many other crutches on the health side of things. And, for us, we don't have any wormers. We don't have any vaccines.
That's beautiful.
Like, they're healthy. And we're selecting for the right type of animal. And, we're able to finish animals in 26 to 32 months on only grass. Like, they don't ever see grain.
That's great. No, that's great. And we worked actually, there was a gentleman on one of our podcasts not too long ago from Ballantine Farms. And it's interesting because you said, you were talking about the fencing and everything like that and how it really doesn't take much of your time. And he started to move into, he had a herd come onto his property. They're actually going from conventional. It's about 600 acres and they're turning it over into a completely regenerative system, cattle integration. We're putting, of course, some soil inputs in to try to get the soil going as quick as we can. Yeah. They do have some finances to do that, but the integrated cattle was, they leased some of their land out, but they had collars on their cattle. And it was pretty cool. That, like, he set up all of his digital fencing on his phone. Like, it's like the modern cowboy, right? Like, that's the easiest way I can say it. But like, he set up all of his digital fencing. Yes, it does shock them a couple of times. They learn, and then it works off of beeps. If they leave the fence, they can come back in. Like, it's really interesting technology. And I think you're exactly right. I'd have to agree. If you can get that cattle onto that land as quick as possible, you're going to be better off than anything else you could do, and it's the same thing he asked. He's like, hey, let's put some good biological fertilizer on this. And it was last fall. And I said, no, let's not actually, right? That's our business. We sell, biotic fertilizers and inputs and all these things. And I'm like, actually, no, let's not do that. You have cattle on the ground right now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to sell you anything. I want to see what this cattle will do by next spring. Let's check again next spring and let's see if there's something that maybe needs balanced, right? Going back to Albrick, and let's see if there's minerals, micros, macros that need balance. Let's balance that out if you're going to spend money, not just throw, more biotic fertilizer. So no, that's really cool. And I have to agree 100% with you. And we're going to actually move into that now with the Albrecht legacy in soil science. And Acres U.S.A., it's famous for championing the Albrecht system of soil fertility, balancing minerals to support biology, right? Like, that's the easiest way to say it. And we're huge believers in it. Obviously, like, personally, I take humic and fulvic acids every day internally, just because I know even if I eat the best organic produce, I do everything I can, there's still imbalances of minerals in foods today and things like that. So with that being said, how do you feel about that? I mean, are you just a huge proponent of the Albrecht theory of balancing that soil out and then everything else follows around, like, no dewormers for your cattle, none of those types of inputs, right? Because that cattle has good nutrient dense, mineral rich foods. I mean, it's all in the soil. It's balanced. So is that what it's about then?
So yes, when I listened, the first person that I heard talk about it was Gabe Brown, and they were talking his cattle herd, they don't feed hay, they're grazing all year round, and they don't give them any mineral. And that's, to me, completely wild. That's the end goal. Like, how do we get to that point? Because then you have zero input costs. So we treat our mineral program pretty seriously. We've done the 20-way type mineral feeders where they can get free choice on the different types of minerals. We've just moved more over into a all-in-one type mineral, and from Dr. Will Winter, who he designed that himself. The mineral game is kind of an interesting one. There's a lot of filler type stuff in the minerals, things that you really don't want your animals to get a hold of. So sourcing the right type of minerals, I think, is really important. And then we've started giving some apple cider vinegar as well in the water, which seems to help them digest a lesser quality type hay. We don't really need it that much in the growing season, but we're buying all of our hay. I don't know if I could justify raising my own hay crop, just the amount of time that it takes, instead of just buying it from somebody. And I think those are the relationships that we need to keep forming. That's the sense of community. Like, I have a guy who makes a good amount of money each year from me because he buys hay, and I'm happy to have him own the equipment and do all the work for it. And he seems happy with that as well. But that means I'm bringing in all these nutrients. Like, I've never taken a hay crop off my farm. So we have a 60-acre farm, then we rent an additional 250 acres, and that's either getting grazed, and usually we'll graze it at some point in the later part of the summer, but we usually take a first crop of hay off that. So, like, I'm kind of robbing from our renters some of the minerals and nutrients and bringing them back here. So, like, this place, the home farm, has absolutely zero type of inputs except the hay bales that we put on it. And to me, the Albrecht principles, I'm no soil geek or soil nerd, wish I was. Maybe at some point when I can get out of the business logistics a little bit, I'll dive more heavily into it. But the idea and the concept behind it, where if we just balance the minerals in the soil, we won't be so reliant on everything else in the future. And then we can, then we can start nitpicking and taking some cool products from people like you guys and really, beefing the production up.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So yeah, we're your partner in it, buddy. I mean, that's what we do. We don't sell stuff to people that they don't need. We look at soil reports, we look at those things that are deficient in the soil, and then that's what we replace. So that's exactly right. Once we start balancing those soils out, you hit it right on the dot. And even like with your mineral feeders, things like that, you are putting minerals back into the soil, right? Which is the good thing through obviously the cattle.
I mean, that's the theory with we still use it. We have a 20-way mineral feeder. The idea is that they're selecting the thing that they're deficient in.
Yep.
There's just an argument on the source of that mineral.
Sure.
What is it? What's the filler stuff in it? Are we pumping these guys full of glyphosate from the different things? Because there's a bunch of rice hulls, I guess, and a lot of mineral. You go buy a $25 bag of mineral from somewhere. It's not the same as, pure, true mineral. So
yeah, and that's what we deal with. We work directly with the mines where actually, humic is mined from.
Yeah.
Different types of, clays, things like that are just, I mean, they're natural sources. No other fillers in them, right? But it does take somebody that understands it. You buy it from a company that makes it, and that's exactly right. They're going to put fillers just like anything else. So,
and that's the number one thing that prevents us, I think, from needing the additional medicine. Like we don't 100%. We don't use fly spray. I had to use it the first couple of years. The longer that this property has existed, the less we've needed the fly spray. But I also think it's partially to do with having a better mineral program as well. This winter, 3 or 4 winters ago, I had taken heifers to a different farm to get them bred for, the last, whatever, I think July to September or something. And they came back and we had lice that winter. And we've had lice now. So we had 3 winters in a row where we had lice. And I can't stand it. I never like freaked out and like put a bunch of worm around them or anything. But this winter we don't have any lice. And it's either because of the new mineral that we're using or adding in the apple cider vinegar, I think helps a lot with that.
Yeah, I think both of those things would, right? Same reason why I take humic and fulvic internally every day, just my health, human health even. And they're all very similar, right? Whether it's soil, animal, human, very, very similar. Now we've moved from this chemical era to the biological era, I'd say, in farming. How do we ensure farmers don't just trade one jug for another, right? Without understanding the underlying soil health. Like we don't want them just buying biology and trading one jug for another, right? And that's sometimes what's going on. Is it education, outreach? Like, what do you take or what do you see it as? For us, like we were saying, we help them start to integrate biology by doing that, right? By saying, okay, well, let's remove some of this chemical or let's remove this fertilizer and integrate some biology into a conventional system. But the whole goal is to move them away from that completely into a regenerative or a system that doesn't require inputs or a lot of inputs, right? Where the profits are going back into the producer or the farmer's pocket versus companies like ours, manufacturers, all of those different things. So how do you think we could do that with farmers?
Well, I think it's a mindset change. That's where the entrepreneur mindset comes in, to always have a feedback loop to figure out, I just did this. Why did I do this? What is the result? Is that the result that makes it worth for doing that thing? Can I do something else that's maybe cheaper or different to get the end result? Always constantly having a feedback loop of thinking about why you did something and if it worked or not. Probably the biggest thing that I see folks having an issue with that's part of the problem that we're having is, you tell farmers that they're entrepreneurs. Well, what percentage of the population is true entrepreneurs and have that brain to be able to, do all of that? It's a low percentage. And the amount of farmers that we need to produce crops, it's not fair to just say to everyone, well, you're an entrepreneur, act like it. They might not have that in them. They might just be really good farmers. And that's why I think that is the education. Like they at least either need to be able to think deeply and to consider all the things that they're doing, or they at least need to, be willing to educate themselves. And I think a lot of folks are, and they do, is providing the education that actually gets them results. And I think that's what we work on. Our business model is set up. It's just like any other business model. where it's a for-profit thing. We're exchanging information to farmers only. They're giving us money back. That's a good model to have. Instead of maybe government model where we have this government money, we're going to go educate farmers because we need to spend the money and we just need to educate them. And they go get they go to a free field day with a free lunch, and it was like a bribe system just to do it. And I don't know if they really get that good of information from it because who's teaching it? Someone
they get directed information. I hate to say it, but it's directed into certain, the way they want programs to work and things like that. It's very directed and pointed. And I have to agree with you. Your model is great. Like, yes, we are selling the education, but guess what? When a farmer leaves the Eco Ag conference, they're educated the proper way, right? It's those types of things, or the education you're providing on books and things like that you're selling. That is very valuable information.
What makes us unique is we're not a nonprofit, so we don't have this free fall of money that's coming in that we just have to go spend without really the idea of like, there's no value exchange. You're getting your money from somewhere else, and then you gotta go do this thing. If our business model is I need to give the farmer value in order for them to pay us money, we're both in better positions. Like, I would much rather pay for good information than get crappy information for free. And
absolutely,
it's that I think if we lean it, because we're kind of unique in that way. Like, we could have a different model. We could go the nonprofit route and get some sort of, grants and things just to teach farmers stuff. And it's like, why though? Because then you have a free event. Half the people are there just because there's a lunch. Half of them then leave right after lunch, or they show up 10 minutes before lunch, eat, and then leave an hour later. Like, there's no actual progress being made there.
Yeah. No such thing as a free lunch, right? No. I tell you, at the end of the day, you get the free lunch and you don't get educated, right? And I agree 100% with you. I think it's great. You're not driven by grants. You're not driven by an agenda. That's the easiest way to say it.
And we don't get, like, we have our advertisers, but I mean, that's a small percentage of the business. It's not like we don't have, you think about media companies in the political sphere. They're funded by their advertisers, sponsors, people. That's who drives that information. We're funded by farmers. And I'd much rather be in that position, because I would hate to have someone walk up, and we've been kind of approached like this before, but like, I don't want to take an uncomfortable amount of money from someone to steer the information a certain way. It just,
that's fair.
It doesn't, it's a short-term thing. Like, and part of life, I think, is this delayed gratification stuff. Like, that's why, if we have extra money in cattle, we don't go buy a bow. We buy more cattle, because delayed gratification that at some point, I will just be farming. I will not be sitting behind a computer and I'll enjoy that life. But I can be patient and wait for that when it's appropriate. I don't need to fake it now.
Sure. No, I like it. And I like it. Education, outreach, good education, that is, and outreach. And I think your guys' model is great. And, and now we'll kind of move into the next place. And, the world that we live in today, it's all high tech, right? Sensors, carbon markets. Why is the old school, and we're still in this Albrecht portion, why is the old school mineral balance theory of William Albrecht more relevant today than ever? Is it because we are depleted so heavily on minerals in the soil? Is that kind of what it is?
There's no technology that's going to beat what nature does. Like, it's just, nature's the number one thing. Like, I wasn't a very religious person, but once you start interacting with the land and be like, these cattle and this land, the thing that grows out of the land naturally without me doing anything, and then they eat it, and then they give us this awesome food that's really good for us, and they're doing a net positive on the land. Like, there's no way all of that got created on an accident.
No.
It's like nature's instinct is the thing that wins out, that's all Albrecht is really talking about. Is, we've depleted the minerals, we've depleted the natural ecosystem, allow it get back to the way it was. And you guys, companies like you guys, and there's lots of companies like you, help you get back quicker to that natural ecosystem model. And that's why, I think technology is only our friend right now, because technology is going to help us get to these places sooner. If we actually get to the point that we're taking photos of tomatoes and taking photos of a ribeye steak, and we're getting a feedback loop instantly for the consumer to say, like, this nutrient density score or whatever minerals are in this, like, If that actually happens and we have these apps on our phones, then who is going to be the big winner in this? It's going to be the people who started a long time ago that already have their soils balanced and they're to the point. Like that's I think the biggest piece from the consumer side, because everyone says the consumer education, and it 100% is. But if they actually get to the point where technology gives them a tool in their pocket or on their phone to test the food, we're all going to be sitting in a really good spot.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that for sure. It's at the end of the day, the guys that start sooner, that balance those minerals, like you said, technology can't fix everything, right? But I'll tell you one thing is the natural system that's in place, that's been put here, it can balance things again. And that starts with the recycling of minerals back into the soils, those things. So boots on the ground now, Henry Pastures. Let's talk a little bit about your farm, or more about it, I should say. What has your own farm taught you that you couldn't learn from an article or a conference?
That's a good one. Or you put in book in there too. Because you always read these books or get this information from these speakers or these authors, and you want to just replicate it. And that's how my mind worked too. Like I took Gabe Brown's book and Mark's book, and I wanted to just replicate exactly what they were describing. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way when you're doing it on the ground. That's why Gabe added the 6 soil health principle as context, because all the information that folks give you, you have to put your own context into it. And I think that's what I've learned the most is like, not everything everyone says is going to work out perfectly for me, but I might as well listen to it and try it quickly. And if it doesn't work, move on to the next thing. And for me, I just try to keep it in a simplistic mindset where we have animals, they move across the land, we move them as much as we possibly can. They seemed a lot healthier, they seem to grow a lot faster, and we have a really good calving success rate because of it. And if I can get a cow to give me a calf every year, and the only thing I gave her the whole year was some time moving her and then hay, that's a pretty good model.
That's a really good model.
Especially right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's no joke. And now you're out there, you're moving fences around, you're managing livestock on your own property, which isn't taking much of your time, which is a good thing. What is the biggest lie or misconception about regenerative farming that you've discovered once you started doing it yourself, would you say?
I think that's why I almost don't even want to say the labor part of it, because I think it is like this idea that we're frolicking in the flowers and it's not really any work. Because it is
still.
It's tons of work. Like the reason we're at this point now is because I've already done it a lot, and the way my brain works is I always think of ways to become more efficient and make things more streamlined. But it definitely was not like that. Fortunately, when I first started farming, I didn't have acres. I just had mainly real estate and then the agency, and I was kind of farming full time, and it made no financial sense to do it at the time because I only had 10 cattle, 10 hogs, and 100 chickens. But I learned the process, the SOP of moving cattle. And then learn the things that you can spend money on that save your time. For me, we buy reels of fence, and then we have like our basic, give me like 10 to 15 paddocks that are already set up. Because then I know that we can go, between a 5 and 6 day rotation by parceling off those paddocks, and we can get the either two times a day or daily moves out of them. But if we have those long paddocks set up, and I bought the extra wire to have them semi-permanent, that takes away a lot of the extra time that is required when you're doing rotational grazing. So I think of it like it's like some front end type time saves you tons of back end time. Because if I can get, we have these little yellow reels that are the cross section reels. They're exactly 350 feet long. So then each paddock is 350 feet long. That line gets thrown across. We put 6 up in a paddock. When we have the whole week of moves set up for them, then that line gets, when we move them into the next paddock, that line gets moved up the hill or down the hill, whichever way we're moving. And then that next line of paddocks is set up for the next week. And it really is not that much time. The time comes in.
It's all systemized, right?
Yeah, the time comes in when you have to move cattle to a different farm, or you have to do something with the handling of them. And I don't love doing that, but that's another thing. Like, do I go buy a truck and a trailer for hauling cattle, or do I just pay our neighbors or people who have trailers a couple $100, throughout the year to move them 2 to 3 times? That makes a lot more sense to me than buying all that myself. But the only real time is, making sure that you have things set up a week in advance. The only time it gets stressful is if you don't have stuff set up a week in advance, and then you're kind of you got cattle moving to the next paddock, and you're trying to set up a fence. It's not fully ready or not hot. And then you have someone do something dumb and run through it. Or, obviously like the hot days aren't that fun in the summer, making sure that they're, the water is fine, making sure they get to some shade. The cold days aren't that fun, making sure the water is fine. But other than that, like the movement of them is very, very systematized. And, if you have a crop field or a perennial system, I don't think it changes much, because when I say these like semi-permanent paddocks, they still have a reel. We get, for those long ones that we just get set up, we get a cheaper reel from Premier One. It has a connection onto your drill bit that you can reel it up. It's not fun to do. I wouldn't want to do it every day, but if we do it once a year, it's not that big of a deal. And then once a year we spend, 8 hours either pulling, like on these rental farms, we pull the fences down.
Sure.
And then it's not that big, 8 hours at the end of the year, 8 hours in the front end of the year, and then the rest of it should be pretty streamlined.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you said, though, that I think the biggest lie is, oh, it's just simple, right? There's no labor at all involved. I mean, there is still work involved, but it's just how good can you get your SOPs down? How good can you systemize it in order to create, I guess you could say your dream, right? The easiest way to grow land or to operate that farm, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the passion to do it, you're probably not going to like it, because it is quite a bit of work up front. Yeah. It's you're learning a new skill, and it's probably going to be painful. So I don't know if that happens to a lot of guys or girls when they, maybe they want to try some cattle, and they get one that gets out, it's on the road, you run it back in. Like, I've definitely had these thoughts where like, I'm done with these guys. Like, and then you come back, on a nice day where everyone's where they're supposed to be, and they're munching on grass and laying down and chilling out. And you're like, well, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's perfect, man. They're living the life, and I am too.
Yeah. And I'd say like the pigs add more time. They're a little bit more labor intensive during the growing season, but then we only have them during the growing season. Same with the chickens.
Yeah. And then you're done. Yeah, no. Next 50 years of eco-ag. This is another thing that we can talk about. It's how's the new generation of farmers, would you say, AI, drones, robotics, different from the pioneers of the 70s, right? So you look at the guy that started Acres, and you look at what he was doing. These new farmers, they're all about AI. They're all about drones, robotics. Like, we've seen it on some of the large farms that we're on. They have, in strawberry, big strawberry farms, things like that. I mean, they're full-fledged. I mean, they're bigger than tractors, the robots they have that are going through and sucking bugs out of them and doing certain things. Like, so how would you say they're different, than the pioneers of it all?
Well, I'd like to say that technology will give us tools to farm like this more effectively and efficiently. I think like the first wave of technologies has, when all these big tractors and planters and harvesters, that supported the commodity guys a lot. Yeah. Like, is some of this new technology going to support this more natural way of farming? Like, can an organic farmer no-till and then have some sort of those like lightning things that go along and zap the weeds? And does it make financial sense? I don't know. Yeah. I tend to, like, I'm not anti-technology and I'm not diehard in technology, but I do think if you own a business and you're trying to, operate more efficiently, to ignore technology would be a mistake. And
I'd have to agree.
AI is coming whether we like it or not. And I would say the new generation of farmers, I think everybody has a level of skepticism towards it. I think everyone has, because of the internet, because of what happened after COVID, because of kind of like the awakening of what we think of our political system. I do think my generation has a more open mind, and they're not just willing to follow the leader quite as much as maybe in the past, when information was a lot easier to be restricted and it'd be harder to get good information. But I think also our generation could struggle with the idea of work more. I think everyone kind of has this idea. They don't want to necessarily
work as hard.
It's definitely, I don't know. It doesn't, like, I don't see a lot of people working as hard as I do. So it doesn't
happen. So I'm,
it's just,
I'm 44 and you're younger than I am, and I don't see very many people. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't have everything.
Work, like, man, a lot of work.
Yeah. And I think everybody, and this is probably because of social media too, like, you get to look at people like, oh, well, maybe, you keep your wife home from work, you live this nice life, the wife doesn't go to work, she takes care of the kids, and you don't have to work that much, working that 30 hours a week. you think you can just jump ahead to that stuff, and you can't. Like, that's the thing. When I learned with entrepreneurship and business, when you read all these books, I wanted to go buy all the real estate because you want this passive income where you make money and you don't have to do anything. Well, that does not exist. Owning real estate is not passive. We have Airbnbs. It's not passive at all. It takes work. We pay someone to do that stuff. Like, it's not truly passive. Now, is it better than some things? For sure. It for sure is, but you don't just get to jump to the front. And also, like the real estate investment thing, like, it took me a long time to realize it's like, you need actual money for that to work. Because, like, look at where we're at now with interest rates spiking like they have in the last couple of years. The math equation using interest rates and borrowing money has changed completely. It went from being a profitable thing, maybe to own rentals, and you could buy a bunch of them because it cash flowed. That equation's gone now. Like, you can't just go buy a bunch of real estate and cash flow it because of the interest rates. So you need actual cash.
Absolutely.
You need actual cash. You need something that's liquid to use, and then you can throw stuff, and then I think it becomes more fun. But number one, I think financial literacy for any generation, especially ours, is really important, because I think with technology, it's going to become a lot easier for us to sit in our houses and make some sort of money, some sort of living wage. And that's kind of a scary thing for me to think about too. Like, what are people, I am worried about AI and the universal income scheme. I think.
Yeah, no,
that is,
I have to agree with you. And, and what is it? I mean, I talk about this a lot. Is it, cryptocurrency? Like, who knows? There's people tying it now to real estate. There's a lot of things happening with it. And it's an interesting thing, So I don't know what that looks like. Is with AI, are we just gonna have a whole bunch of people sitting at their houses? They think they're hopping to the front, but really they're just getting their checks and living controlled, basically. Personally, I'd rather work hard. I'll work hard and try to figure out the way, right?
If that does happen, real assets are going to be the thing that is worth the most money. And I look at real assets as land. For me, land and cattle.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, there's only so much land. I agree with you on that. So, all right, if you had to predict the headline of the 100th anniversary issue of Acres USA, what would it be, buddy? So you got 50 years, basically, right? A little bit, right around there. I mean, 100th anniversary.
We've surpassed 40% of the ground is being regeneratively managed. Like, could you imagine if we get to that point? What are we at now? Changer. Probably 1%,
if that.
Less than 1%,
if that.
You have true, the practices that Acres has nothing to do with me. I'm just a steward of it, but the information that was started with Acres and that we continue to put forth has created a situation where it is the obvious solution for farmers, and there's wide range adoption. And I think we're moving towards that. I don't love government money being pushed out. I don't like them. Like, it's cool, $750 million to this regenerative ag pilot program, but we need to have true adoption. It's not going to be government money. It needs to be actual economics that take foothold, and we provide people a real avenue for success.
Absolutely. You have to, just like you said earlier on about, some of the programs and the grants and all that, you're exactly right with that. If you have people excited about it and excited about making money, and they see their land changing and they see their operations changing and it becomes profitable, and their kids want to stay back now and take over the farms, versus the kids like, I'm out of here, man. I saw what my grandpa and dad did. I don't even want anything to do with this at all at this point. That's going to be the exciting part. And not only that, but like you said, if you can get that many acres of land under regenerative principles, I think overall everything's going to be better, right? I mean, producers are going to be more profitable. People are going to want to maybe start farms again, right? You don't hear of people being like, oh, I'm going out to start a farm this year. Not too many people, at least, right? Unless you have quite a bit of capital, or you're smart like yourself and you understand how to finance and you understand how to do those things. So I agree with you. And I'm going to hit you now.
I think one thing on that too is, we're at a point, I think people talk about it a lot, where we're going to have the biggest exchange of land in like world history or something over the next 20 years. I think our generation is positioned better to stay on the land than previous generations. Whatever happened, like my dad grew up on a farm. He would have had zero interest in continuing to farm. But at the very least, a lot of these farms that have been owned for multiple generations, I hope that the next generation who inherits that stuff either wants to do it themselves, and they're in a position where money isn't quite the biggest driving force, or they want to find farmers who are doing the practices that they are more interested in. Because there's no excuse now for saying that the consumer mindset or consumer information, that we don't have enough information out there that shows the health benefits and the general environmental benefits of farming like this. So as that land changes hands, as long as China doesn't buy all of it, or these large corporations that want to keep going down the same path buy all of it, if it actually changes hands to people with a little better mindset, that is one positive thing to look at. Now we could go the other way, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
I agree. Now I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions, a few of them, and then we'll tie this thing up. But what's one book every farmer should read, or we could say gardener, right? The smaller scale guys as well, should read that isn't published by Acres?
Probably Dirt to Soil would be the best one to just start shifting some mindsets.
Dirt to Soil. Perfect. What is the most underrated tool on a regenerative farm?
Your brain.
Perfect. What's the best piece of advice you've received from a guest on your own podcast?
I really liked, I had Joel Hollingsworth on the podcast, and he has a ranch in Oklahoma where he's scaled from like 0 to over 500 head in 3 years. And he put it where it's like the idea of essentially moving the goalposts out like 10, 20 years. Instead of thinking, if you can create a situation where you can, look at the whole scope and move the goalposts out 10, 20 years, you're going to find this become a lot more enjoyable and successful. Now, what does that take? It takes a, financial comfort and the ability to continue on your life. But, he developed a interesting model. He came from an investing world, and he actually has people buying beef shares before they even purchase them. So they get kind of like the end dollar when they buy them. And then they has people holding them, and they technically have a share of a cow or something. It's a little bit cool. Confusing. I don't think that that model is necessarily scalable across, because it's complex, and he came from an investment world where he understands those things. That's, if we can all get to the point where you're making enough money, and it doesn't matter where you're making money. I think people feel like they're a failure if they don't make all their money farming. I definitely feel that at times. Like, what are we talking about here? I'm making a living on real estate and running a business, and farming's kind of like, to me, the setting up for my kids. But
no, it's legacy, right? That's the whole thing. It's legacy. That's the whole thing. It's that's what it is. No, I like that. And just not thinking like in 3 years he's grown it to 500 head, right? But the reality of the matter is like, now let's set that goalpost out 10, 20 years. Like, you have to have the, long-term thinking. It can't all happen overnight or in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years, right?
Yeah, because especially with cattle, like, how else do you make those hard decisions? If you're looking at it a 20-year scope, it's a lot easier to call an animal who isn't performing the way they should. Because your goal is, how do I get this ideal breed of animal for my area? How do I get to the point where I'm Gabe Brown and we have this cow herd and they get no hay a year and they're giving us calves? And I mean, that's an incredible model.
Right? Talk about regenerative. There you have it. So no, well, perfect. Well, Taylor, we appreciate it. If you don't mind, your knowledge, your take on the entrepreneurial side of it, taking it over to farming, owning businesses, owning real estate. I think it's really tied it all together. And we definitely appreciate you being on Soil Talks. It's really great. Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Where can the listeners find out more about Acres U.S.A., the EcoAg conference, and any of your work you're doing?
You can just search AcresUSA.com, and most everything will be. We have like 17 different websites.
Welcome to the club. We do too.
I know. AcresUSA.com is the main one. Our magazine subscription has also a digital aspect to it, where you get a pile of online like courses and other information. You also get the magazine digitally, and I think we've put that in a kind of a new realm. Like that is like the future of, if you're gonna have a magazine, it needs to be different. It can't just be sent, to people's doorsteps. So that's widely available to people. Our members.acresusa.com is where all the articles live. And then the conference it will be December 1st through the 4th in Iowa City in 2026. So we're going right into the heart of the beast.
I like it. No, that's great. Definitely just appreciate your input, appreciate your aspect on this new, I guess, that economics of regenerative agriculture, of how you operate. People will definitely appreciate this. And like I said, look forward to doing another one with you. If you sometime we'll hop back on or help on together, talk some more as times change. I think it'd be great for our listeners to be able to get the scope from you, how your operation grows. But if you get a chance, follow Soil Talks podcast, like it, everything you can, support us, support obviously Acres USA if you would. They are the voice of eco-agriculture. And just again, thanks a lot, Taylor, for having you on today and for taking the time to be with us. And we look forward to doing it again with you.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. Good luck with everything this year.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good luck to you as well.